She was known by a slew of names, including Cannibal Cathy, Australia's Hannibal Lecter, and the Black Knight of Aberdeen. And on the night of February 29th, 2000, she became Australia's first woman to be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. This is the story of Kathrine Knight. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of our story, let's take a look at the past of a murderer so horrible it shocked Australia to its very core. Hello everybody, and welcome to the Dark Hour. Kathrine Mary Knight was born October 24th, 1955 in a very dysfunctional environment. Barbara, Kathrine's mother, was married to Jack Rowan and had 4 sons before she started having an affair with Jack's friend and co-worker Ken Knight. See, the Rowans and the Knight families were well known in the small town of Aberdeen. By the way, it's in New South Wales in Australia. I almost forgot to mention that. And the affair spread like wildfire. This caused Barbara to move to Moray with Ken, leaving her 4 sons behind. Barbara went on to have about 4 additional children with Ken. This is about when Kathrine comes into the picture. Barbara gave birth to twins in Tatterfield. In 1959, when Kathrine was 4, Jack would pass away, in which 2 of his sons would move back in with Barbara, and the other 2 would move to Sydney with their aunt. Now, life with Ken Knight wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Ken was a raging alcoholic, and would openly use violence and intimidation to force his way with Barbara, up to 10 times a day. Barbara would often in turn tell her daughters all the grave details of everything that was happening and how much she hated men. Kathrine would also be frequently assaulted by various family members, but thankfully not her father. This continued until she was around 11 years old. The only family member that Kathrine would ever get close to was her uncle Oscar Knight, who ended his own life in 1969, which she would constantly say that his ghost frequently visits her, something she still maintains to this very day. Later that year in 1969, Kathrine's family would move back to Aberdeen, where Kathrine attended, not good with names, Muswellbrook High School. Hopefully that's right. Kathrine was considered a loner and a bully who picked on kids that were much smaller than her. Kathrine assaulted one schoolboy with a weapon in one instance, and in another instance was injured by a teacher who acted in self-defense. But when Kathrine wasn't causing havoc, she was considered a model student and often would receive awards for her good behavior. When Kathrine turned 15, she dropped out of high school without ever learning how to read or write. She then started working as a cutter at a local clothing factory, and in 1972, Kathrine left to start work at what she referred to as her dream job. That was cutting up the offal at the local slaughterhouse. There she was promoted quickly to deboning, which gave her her own set of butcher's knives. At home, those knives would always hang over Kathrine's bed, so that, quote, they would always be in handy when I need them. In 1973, Kathrine would start one of many dysfunctional relationships, starting with David Callett. David was a co-worker of Kathrine's and was a very heavy drinker, and after they began dating, David often slept with her twin sister. I guess they probably looked alike. David's either a very brave man or a very stupid one, and we'll get to that in a minute. Often David would get into drunken brawls, and Kathrine was known to step in and throw fists to back him up. Kathrine and David married in 1974, arriving on Kathrine's motorcycle, since David was too drunk to drive. As soon as they arrived, Barbara, Kathrine's mother, pulled David aside to give him some very bleak advice. Warning, there is cussing involved. I'm going to keep it as strict and legit as possible. She said, and I quote, "You better watch this one or she'll kill you. Stir her up the wrong way or do the wrong thing and you're don't ever think of cheating on her. She'll kill you." Such kind advice from a caring mother about her loving daughter. On their wedding night, Kathrine tried to strangle David because, quote, he fell asleep after only having intercourse 3 times. Kathrine was very violent towards David. On one occasion, now pregnant, Kathrine burned all of David's clothes and smashed him over the head with a frying pan. David fled the house, and after collapsing at a neighbor's house, was transported to the local hospital, where he was treated for a severely fractured skull. Police wanted to charge Kathrine with assault and battery with intent, But Kathrine changed her demeanor and convinced David to drop all charges. Hence, stupid man. In May 1976, after giving birth to her daughter Melissa Ann, David left Kathrine for another woman and moved out of town. Not so stupid man. The next day, Kathrine was seen pushing Melissa down Main Street, violently thrashing the stroller around. She would later be admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital in Tamsworth for postnatal depression and spent a few weeks recovering. Shortly after getting out, Kathrine would now place her 2-month-old Melissa on the train tracks shortly before the train was due to arrive. She then stole an axe, went into town, and threatened to kill several passerbys. An old man by the name of Old Ted was near the tracks at the time and rescued Melissa right in time, right before the train arrived. Kathrine was arrested again and sent to St. Elmo's, but had a miraculous recovery and checked herself out the following day. A few days later, she was at it again. Kathrine attacked a woman and demanded that she take her to Queensland, where she could find David. The woman escaped when they stopped at a nearby gas station, and by the time the police made it, Kathrine had taken a young boy hostage and was threatening to kill him with one of her knives. Shortly after, she was arrested by police who beat her with brooms and admitted her to Moorset Psychiatric Hospital. They beat her with brooms. I guess that's a good way to disarm someone with knives. Never really thought about that. Kathrine told one of the nurses on duty that she was intending to kill the mechanic at the gas station, since he was the one that fixed David's car so that he could escape, and then she was going to travel to Queensland and kill David and his mother. When police informed David of this horrific news, you'd think he would move further away as fast as possible, but no. He moved back to Aberdeen with his mother to help Kathrine. This goes back to the point earlier of him being either a brave or a stupid man. I say we mark out the brave and just go with stupid. Kathrine was released on August 9th, 1976 to the care of her mother-in-law, and along with David moved to Ipswich, interesting name, where Kathrine got a job at Denmore Meatworks. March 6, 1983, she gave birth to another daughter, Natasha Marie, and 1984, she left David and moved back in with her parents in Aberdeen, then to a rental property in Muswellbrook. Sorry if I'm butchering that, I'm not good with names like these. She started working at another slaughterhouse, and a year later she injured her back and was put on disability. Not needing to live close to her work anymore, she moved back to Aberdeen into government housing. 1986. Now 38-year-old Kathrine met David Saunders. And a few months later, he moved in with Kathrine and her 2 daughters, but would keep his apartment in Scone. Kathrine would often get jealous and kick him out, then travel back to his apartment and beg for him to come back. 1987, she would slit the throat of David's 2-month-old puppy in front of him for no other reason but to set an example of what would happen if he was to cheat, then smashed him over the head with a frying pan. Her modus operandi. In June 1988, she gave birth to another daughter, Sarah. That was about the time David put a deposit on a new house for his family. Kathrine would decorate the house with macabre things like animal skins, skulls, horns, rusted animal traps, machetes, pitchforks. Every inch of her house was covered, including the ceiling. Such a lovely home. After an argument, Kathrine hit David in the face with an iron and then stabbed him in the stomach with a pair of scissors, which prompted David to move back to Scone. But stupid man number 2 would soon return to find all of his clothing cut up. David then left for work, went into hiding. Kathrine would search for him but never would find him. Stupid men being stupid, David returned a few months later to find Kathrine to put a restraining order on him. Go figure. Fast forward to 1997, Kathrine would give birth to a boy named Eric to a fellow named John Chillingworth, but eventually would leave him for his friend/co-worker John Price, who she was having an affair with. This is about where our meat and potatoes of the story start to simmer. John Price was born April 4th, 1955, and was considered a terrific bloke, and liked by everyone who knew him. John was a father of 3 from a prior marriage that ended in 1988, and his youngest daughter would live with his ex-wife. John was aware of Kathrine's violent past, but she moved in with him in 1995. His children took well to Kathrine, and John made a lot of money as a minor, and apart from a few violent arguments, their life was considered to be a bunch of roses. In 1998, Kathrine and John got into a fight when he refused to propose to her. In retaliation, she filmed John as he allegedly stole from work, even though he was just taking med kits that were expired and in the trash. John's boss had no point but to fire him, since it was technically still considered stealing, even though it was trash. Same day, John kicked Kathrine out of his house. A few months later, they would patch things up. Kathrine would move back in with John. Their fighting became more frequent, and John's friends no longer wanted anything to do with him as long as he stayed with Kathrine. This is about where the meat and potatoes of her story is just about ready to come out of the oven. In early February 2000, after a series of assaults on John, Kathrine stabbed him in the chest with a knife. Tired of the abuse, John kicked her out again, and this time going to the courthouse to take out a restraining order on Kathrine on his way to work. That afternoon, John told coworkers that if he was not in the next day, it was because Kathrine murdered him. And boy was he right. When John returned home that night, he found Kathrine waiting for him. He then spent the evening over at his neighbor's house before returning home at about 11 p.m. to go to bed. Earlier that day, Kathrine had bought some black lingerie and filmed herself making crude comments to her children. She would later arrive at John's house while he was sleeping, sat down and watched some TV, took a shower, made herself at home. Kathrine then woke up John to have some fun, which John fell asleep afterwards. At around 6 a.m., February 30th, 2000, his neighbors became worried as they seen his car in the driveway. He didn't arrive for work, so his employer sent a coworker to check on him. Both the coworker and the neighbor tried to knock on his bedroom window to try to wake John up, but nothing seemed to work. They soon called the police after they seen blood on the front door. Why didn't they go to the front door first, though? Why knock on the window? At 8 p.m., the police arrived and kicked in the door to find Kathrine passed out on the floor after trying to commit suicide from taking a massive amount of pills. Kathrine had stabbed John while he was sleeping. Blood evidence suggested that John woke up shortly afterwards and tried to make a run for it, where Kathrine would chase him throughout the house. John managed to open the front door, but was bleeding out quickly and was dragged back inside by Kathrine, where he finally bled out in the hallway. John was stabbed 37 times across the front and back of his body. Several hours after John had bled out, Kathrine skinned him and hung his skin on a meat hook like a prized pelt in the living room. Kathrine then decapitated John and put his head in the stove in a pot of water. She then cut off his buttocks. Can I say butt? She then cut off his butt and put the meat and some potatoes in the oven. It's around this time that our meat and potatoes is coming out of the oven. Kathrine then made 2 servings before placing them on the table with John's children's names on place cards. A 3rd serving was thrown on the lawn for unknown reasons. Then another serving was made for Kathrine herself. She then rearranged the body with the left arm placed over an empty bottle of soda with the legs crossed. Kathrine left a note on top of a picture of John, bloodstained and covered in small bits of flesh. The note read, "Time got you back, John, for raping my daughter. You to Beck for Ross," or his children, "and for little John." The allegations in the notes about rape were found out to actually be false. Kathrine was taken to a hospital where she made a recovery. Then she showed up for court. Kathrine offered to plead guilty for manslaughter, but was denied on February 2nd, 2001. Kathrine was charged with murdering John Prince, to which she would plead not guilty due to claiming to having no memory of the crime. She was due back to court to stand trial July 23rd, 2001, but court was adjourned due to the judge falling ill. October 15th, 2001, court was back in session, but would again be canceled after a few of the jury had dropped out and Kathrine's attorney had claimed that Kathrine had amnesia and disassociation. A claim backed by psychiatrists, although they did consider Kathrine still sane enough to stand trial. Dr. Timothy Lyons now took the stand and described the skinning and decapitation process. Kathrine would become hysterical and have to be sedated. Now, on November 8th, 2001, Judge O'Keefe pointed out the nature of the crimes and Kathrine's lack of remorse required severe punishment, and sentenced Kathrine to life in prison without parole. And so, this marks the first time that a woman had received life in prison without parole in the country of Australia. In June 2006, Kathrine tried to appeal her sentence, stating that life in prison without parole was too severe for a killing. Kathrine's appeal was dismissed, to which the current judge wrote, "This was an appalling crime, almost beyond contemplation in a civilized society." Now that was a roller coaster of abuse and forgiveness that let Kathrine hurt a lot of people. I personally feel that it took the justice system a little bit too long to put Kathrine behind bars. But in the end, I'm glad they finally did. With everything that she had done, from stabbing exes to trying to murder her 2-month-old child twice. Still surprised it took that long to put Kathrine away. Now, I'm not going to say you liked the video, but if you liked the video, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing for weekly uploads. And if you have any murderers that you would like me to look at and like to see videos on, make sure to comment them down below. And I'll see you all in the next Dark Hour.